here's another example, I think, of the niche group of our Twitter, and we've got, I've probably only got like 500 Twitter followers or so, but it's all the reporters that cover us. It's all the vast majority of the candidates, I should say, but all the candidates that are out there aggressively doing things like, trying to use social media to reach out to voters. And it's the elections junkies. It's the people who are going to get into this, as well as the people who are, really looking to use our information for their own work that they're doing. And, things like taking a look at the closeout log on, the first day of early voting to see exactly how many votes were cast. It's on a piece of paper sitting there in front of me. And it's like, oh, sitting here, there's people who would love this stuff. And I'm just like tweeting it. And again, great, wow, wonderful, nobody shares this information. And I haven't consistently shared that information either, which would be great if I could. And I definitely built an appetite in some ways. Once I started sharing that kind of information, then I would start getting the calls, what are today's numbers, what are today's numbers, what are today's numbers. So it definitely does build an anticipation. But it's something that was very much appreciated as well. Only reason I have this screenshot up here, this is actually a shot from during the day on our primary election day, and this is where I was really feeling the value, not just as like a media splash or people are going to love it that we share it this way, but I was really seeing how valuable the tool was for me in a very real and immediate sense, because it's primary election day, the phones are ringing off the hook, everything is just completely batty, and we've got a press conference scheduled, and we need to move the press conference over to the other end of the building. And I don't have time to go upstairs to my desk and go send around an email announcement to everybody I had sent the email announcement to about the press conference and tell them that we've moved it. I'm just tweeting it. Because I know everybody that actually, A, got the press release, and, B, is actually going to come to this thing, is, A, not at their desk, and, either, and B, going to see it on Twitter. So, I'm just able to tweet that we're moving, across the other end of the building due to noise on one end, and it worked, and people found us. People moved. They were watching Twitter very aggressively themselves over the course of the day. It was a tool that actually recognized the reality of where I was in my ability to communicate information in the middle of the day, and recognized the reality of where my audience was, which was somewhere around my building. And or out at our polling places, and if they were interested in coming to this event, then this was going to be a really good way to reach them actually, because they were watching for what we had to say on election day. I never did send a press release about it. There are things that would have been optional press releases before that have become even more optional now, because it feels like I'm really reaching our core audience much better over Twitter than I would be reaching by the press release. And the day after the election, 2 days after the election, and we got almost as much flack as these guys up in New York got on primary election day for various kinds of late opening times and struggles with the new equipment, and so we're kind of in this quasi-crisis communication sort of a mode, and we were late getting our results out, we were late getting polling places open, we were facing a lot of criticism over the course of the day. We were getting, credit for being responsive and more responsive, frankly, on Twitter, because it was easier to respond to than, on the phones where you've just got way too many calls coming in. But after we sort of calmed down over the course of, by Thursday, I put up a couple of tweets that just said, okay, we were too slow in reporting our results on Tuesday. We will improve our process for November. And I did this sort of self-deprecating Twitter game, self-mocking thing of putting a little hashtag in, and I just said, stating the obvious. And again, do you see us, picks it right up. He apologizes for poor primary performance. And people in the agency disagreed over whether that was the right thing for me to say or the wrong thing for me to say. Again, why not to entrust this to an intern? You entrust it to somebody that you trusted to speak to the press in a crisis mode, to make judgment calls. I think it worked out real well for us in the end, because it sort of got us past that, the same thing that self-mocking humor ever does, which is to kind of break the ice and get you past, past that point. And then it picked up a lot of the other things, thanked our coworkers, asked us to report any and all problems that we experienced on Tuesday. We can only fix what we know about. It actually got our message out in a way that it got picked up, I think, in a better way than if we tried to hold a press conference or do a press release. I mean, that would have sort of blown it up in a way that was outsized to the real need. So it just sort of filled this niche of a not quite all that of the press conference and the press release, and not the radio silence either. And or the, you can do the sort of one-on-one conversations and see how things get picked up by an individual reporter. But this was mass communication, but mass communication to a key audience, and only that key audience. Why did I put this slide in? I put this slide in because this was skipping ahead to early voting for the November election, and it was one of those cases where I'm just, I'm hanging around downstairs by our early voting location, and there's, I'm just kind of there to see if there's any reporters who show up or whatever, and I'm sort of, tweeting, well, there's, so many people waiting in line. And now the media has really started to get wise to how to cover us. They had the experience in the primary, and now in the general, they've realized they don't have to be down there to figure out how many voters are waiting in line. They don't have to come down and see, for whatever their mid-date update is, they can just check my Twitter feed. So I'm putting things into the Twitter feed, and they're just getting picked up left and right by everybody who's writing their midday, story about whatever our status is. And, it's getting quoted, according to spokeswoman at the board, and this quote from me. When I didn't actually speak to the reporter, I just put it in the Twitter feed. But, it was the forum for getting the message out without me actually having to talk to all of these reporters. There's a definite and opposite relationship. The days that I am heavy on the Twitter are the days that my phone rings less. And the days that I'm off and dealing with other things and not on Twitter are the days when I get back to my phone and there's a red light and there's all these calls from people to ask the information that I would have tweeted out to everybody, and now I got to call 6 people back because I didn't tweet it. How are we doing on time? We're
Getting there.
We're okay. All right. Just a shot there of a lot of the people reporting problems. We're finding Twitter. We're using Twitter to report them to us. We were able to communicate straight back and forth. Somebody's reporting a problem. We're not seeing it. We've dispatched her over to investigate. Just being responsive and using that particular tool to do it. And then we got to the only on Twitter sort of. And we calculated this. We thought about this. We met about it. We get the call from a precinct that in the district you could write in using a hand stamp, using an inked hand stamp. And they were out. There was an active write-in campaign going on, and sure enough, we had somebody use that hand stamp on the touch screen, and leave a little mark for their preferred candidate on the touch screen. And and I walked into the boss and I told him about it, and I'm like, I totally want to tweet it. I really want to tweet this, but I'm not gonna. And he just kind of looked at me. He's like, go ahead, do it. So I did, and it was viral. It was just all over this is just showing, that, so many people who, 115 people or whoever who straight up retweeted my message. But then you had all the people who retweeted their messages. Then you've got like NPR sending it out, and then you've got it was just this. It was a viral Twitter thing that it happens. It was I think in the way that the social media sort of attitudes are right now, it was another one of those. Yeah, I could have stood up in front of a podium and kind of cracked a joke about that and confirmed. Yeah, we got a report that somebody used a So it was a safe thing to put out on social media, and that's sort of my prism. If I would say it standing at a podium, if I would be okay with it being, on the front page of the paper tomorrow, then it's okay for me to put out there in social media. I do have to consider the audience, and we all have to consider the audience as we're, as we're putting these things out, and as we're ready. I would never have put out something like this in my very first Twitter status update ever in my first month of being on Twitter.